Hey there, Vikings! Welcome to the channel. So, for today, we are starting a brand new playthrough of Valheim. We're starting right from the beginning, so those of you who have played Valheim a lot and pretty much know most of the early game stuff, you might want to skip through the first few episodes because we are starting right from the beginning with a fresh world and a fresh character. So we will be taking a fair few episodes to get to the newer content which has been released recently. And for those of you that didn't know, on the 14th of May, the Ashlands update finally hit Steam. There were a few issues with the Xbox and Microsoft version of it, so I'm not sure if it has been updated today. Hopefully it will come out sooner rather than later for those of you on Xbox, especially my friend who I usually play with, as he couldn't play with me last night, so I did feel a little bit bad for him. And there are a couple of things I want to make you aware of just as we're being flown into our start location by this lovely Valkyrie here. First of which is that this playthrough will be 100% solo. I am basically doing a full playthrough from start to finish. As I said, it's with a brand new character on a brand new world. So I want to try and showcase as much of the game as possible and basically make the playthrough for players who have never played the game before and for people who have played it hundreds and hundreds of times. But I imagine for those people they'll probably want to skip the first 5 to 10 episodes, as that will be majority Meadows and probably hopefully Black Forest by that point. I'm not sure about how long I'm going to make the episodes run, probably between 20 to 30 minutes long. Maybe some will be shorter, maybe some will be a bit longer depending on what we're actually doing in that particular episode. And secondly, in conjunction with this series, I will also be releasing some singular videos on the newer content that's just come out with Ashlands. I do currently have a multiplayer world going with a friend that we're about halfway through the Mistlands, so we still have some catching up to do before we actually go to the Ashlands. We haven't even killed the Queen yet, so we do have a bit of catching up to do, but I am hoping to get there as soon as possible. We'll probably go and have a bit of an explore and then come back and finish off the Queen. So I will be releasing some videos that is on the more updated content that has just been released, some of the new crafting materials, some of the new creatures, stuff like that. So just so you're aware that I won't be completely avoiding the Ashlands until I get there on this playthrough. I will be releasing some of that content as well. Okay, now that we've covered those two parts, let's get started on this brand new world of YouTube. Yes, I've named the world YouTube. Please don't judge me. I am terrible at naming things. Heck, my character's name is Infinite Input. That's how bad I am at naming things. Although it was that, or I was just gonna call it my own name. So yeah, we've just stuck with that for the time being. And you'll also see that Hugin, one of Odin's ravens, is here to give us some helpful hints and advice on certain aspects of the game. He will pop up every now and then, periodically throughout the playthrough, to give us some advice. Is it he, she, or they? I'm not really sure what the gender of Odin's ravens are. It's not something I've ever really seen covered in Nordic mythology. I don't think it really matters. Hugin will appear periodically to give us some helpful hints and advice. I'm not going to read them out myself, but I will leave them up on the screen for a few seconds for anybody that wants to pause the episode and read them themselves. If you're a newer player, I'd recommend reading them. They can be quite helpful for newer people. And also, Munin will appear at periodic points as well. Now, I can't remember the specific type of advice that they give, but both the ravens will appear and give you advice. I'd recommend reading them. It's very useful stuff. And first things first, I have noticed a couple of settings that I do want to change on this playthrough. You will notice that I am running a pretty high graphics settings. I'm running it as pretty much as max for everything, I believe. But I am going to turn off both motion blur and we're going to turn off the screen shake or the camera shake, as I'm not a fan of either of them. I don't really know why. I think for camera shake specifically, the first time I ever encountered it, I can't remember which game it was I was playing, but basically the camera was moving left and right for the footsteps of the character. But yeah, for the first hour or so it was pretty cool. It was a nice little immersion feature, and then after the first hour it got very tedious, especially when you were trying to focus on something far away, but it kept moving because the character's head was bobbing left and right. So yeah, I've always been a proponent of turning that feature off. I just don't like it. I'm just a bit picky in my older age. Apologies. But yeah, we will be turning that and the motion blur feature off, although the first time I tried it I forgot to save it and then continued playing and realised that it didn't actually save my settings, so we'll have to go back in and turn that one off again. While we're going around gathering up some of the basic crafting components, so some wood and some stone, we'll also be gathering some food as well that we'll need. I do want to cover one of the more important features from the very start of the game, which is the location we were delivered to by our lovely Valkyrie friend. So we were dropped off at the boss stone circle. Now, each of the biomes within the game has its own corresponding boss, which you'll need to defeat. Once you've defeated that boss, you will gain its head as a trophy. If you bring that head back to these boss stones and attach it to the corresponding stone, you'll be able to activate that trophy and gain a special power. Now, each of those powers does something different, and I will go over them in more detail once we've unlocked them. But you will have seen right at the start that the first boss we need to defeat is Eikthyr, the deer boss for the meadows. In order to tell which biome you're currently in, if you look at the top right of your screen, you'll see the minimap, and then the top right of the minimap is your biome. So it currently says meadows. That's where we'll find Eikthyr. Using the small stone tablet to the left of Eikthyr's stone, so it's a small stone tablet with a circular kind of glowing red symbol on it, looks a bit like a star. That's a location tablet. Once you activate that, it will give you the nearest boss's summoning location, and you'll be able to travel there and summon the boss. You will need certain items to do so, and the summoning location will give you a special hint as to what that item is. It can be quite straightforward, but sometimes it can be a bit difficult as well, so make sure you're keeping hold of as many items as possible whilst you're exploring new biomes to get that boss summoning item. Whoa, okie dokie, right, that was a lot of information to give out all at once there. Honestly, I didn't feel like that ramble was ever going to stop. That was about 6 solid minutes of talking there, Jesus. Alright, anyway, let's take a bit of a breather, take a bit of a step back and work out what it is that we're doing. You'll have noticed for the first 5 or 6 minutes I have been wandering around gathering some wood and stone to make our basic crafting tools and stuff like that. We have built a club, we're also building a hammer, and we also want to make a stone axe from the crafting list on the right hand side of our screen so that we can make cutting down trees and collecting wood a lot quicker and easier. For that we're going to need some more stone, so we will have to do a bit more exploration and gathering. And we also want to gather some more food as well. I have picked up some shrooms and some raspberries already. You'll have noticed they gave me different buffs when I ate them, and that those buffs have a time limit. So if you haven't seen it, in the bottom left of your screen is your health bar, that tiny little red bar. And just to the left of that, you have 3 slots for your stomach, which are the 3 meals that you can eat. And those meals are time limited. So I believe we got 15 minutes for the mushroom and 10 minutes for the raspberry, and they both gave different amounts of buffs. So I believe the mushroom gave 15 of health and 15 stamina, whereas the raspberry, the raspberry is something that's always irritated me ever so slightly in this game, because it's called a raspberry. Yes, I agree, it is called a raspberry, but if you look at the picture for it, it's a strawberry. I'm sorry, but that picture is a strawberry. Raspberries don't look like that, and I get it confused all the time. I call them strawberries all the time. I know strawberries aren't in the game, but I call it a strawberry all the time because I see that picture and my mind jumps to strawberries, probably because I love them. But yeah. My apologies, it is a raspberry, that's what it is called in the game, that's what it's supposed to be, but I will keep forgetting that and calling it strawberries going forward. Again, apologies. So with those, they have a certain time limit, and as that time limit reduces, especially as it gets closer to running out, you will notice your health and your stamina buffs are reducing along with it. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the rate of bonus lost is over that time limit. I think for maybe the first 5 minutes you don't lose anything, and then it will slowly start decreasing over the remaining 5 minutes, something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but there are different meals and stuff that you can eat, and as those meals get higher in level, you will get better bonuses and longer time limits as well. I believe the max I've seen so far is 30 minutes. Might have even seen 35. Can't remember off the top of my head, but we'll probably see that as we get to it in the later stages of food. We will also need to gather a lot more of these to make sure that we've got plenty of stocks, because a lot of the stuff you gather from the beginning biome, the meadows, will be used in later stage recipes as well. So these little yellow flowers, the dandelions that I've been picking up as well, they are used in a lot of late game recipes, so I am gathering as many of those as I can now, so I don't have to worry about it when I get there in the future. Now that we have crafted our first axe, we can start cutting trees down and gathering up as much wood as possible. Now, with trees and cutting them down, you'll notice they leave a stump in the ground once you cut them down. Now, you can always just leave the stumps if you want, but they won't grow back into trees if you leave them. They will just sit there and be a bit of an eyesore. I always take them out as soon as possible. Now, one thing you'll notice as well is that the basic axe swing animation is across your body in a wide arc, but sometimes when you try and hit a stump, it's too high and you'll miss completely. What you can do then is your heavy attack, which is a downward swing animation, which will hit the stump, it will do more damage, and it will also use a bit more stamina. So just to be aware that it'll take a little bit longer to do it that way, but that means that you can hit things on the ground with your axe. Now this is one-handed axes as well. Two-handed axes have a completely different animation altogether, and I don't think you'd really use them for cutting trees down. So just to be aware that it's one-handed axes that you should mainly use for cutting trees down. Now the reason we want to gather up as much wood as possible is that we are on the hunt for our first base location. The night is nearly upon us. We're probably about halfway through the day actually, but I think daytime and nighttime are about half an hour each. And you will want to have some kind of hut or some kind of base of operations for that first nighttime. In the meadows, it's not so dangerous, but you will notice an increased amount of creatures will come after you at nighttime. This is just the greylings, the little goblin guys who keep running up and trying to slap you. They don't do a huge amount of damage and they're not really dangerous, but they can be very irritating if you're trying to do something else like exploring or building and things like that. So at nighttime, they will be a bit more frequent. You can just run around with a torch in your hands because the greylings hate fire and they will just run away. But as soon as you put the torch away, or as soon as they get far enough away, they'll turn around and start running straight back at you. So I always just kill them as soon as I can. They drop a bit of resin, which is used for making more torches, so it could be useful. I usually just take them out as soon as I can. Now with our first base, I want to build it as close to the coast as possible. The reason why I do this is because your main first island is not connected to other islands within the game. You won't be able to walk everywhere. You will have to sail for a lot of the game and to discover new islands and new biomes. So having your first main base be as close to the coast as you can means that you can just get in a boat and sail straight off to find new islands and discover new places rather than having to travel and stuff like that. But that's not to say that you shouldn't build a base away from the coast. That's just my recommendation. It's what I prefer doing. Plus, it also allows me to build a pretty cool dock off the side of this base as well, which I love doing, especially for things like boats, because some of the later game boats are really cool and pretty fast as well. So I definitely recommend getting into the sailing. It's a pretty cool mechanic. But yeah, we're just going to continue going around, gathering up this wood and trying to find a decent spot out in the open. Okay, so we just killed our first 1-star boar. Now, with creatures and enemies in Valheim, they have varying different levels. There are 1-stars and 2-stars, and there's also the basic types. The basic types will drop one of their materials if they drop one, and the higher levels will drop more. I believe the way it works is that a 1-star creature will have twice the amount of health, deal twice the amount of damage, and will drop twice the amount of items. And I believe a 2-star has 4 times the amount of health, deals 4 times the amount of damage, and drops 4 times the amount of items. I could be wrong about that though. I will have to double check that and reference it in a future video. But I believe that is the way it works. So I would say that it is beneficial to try and fight them when you find them, but higher level enemies will become very dangerous at 1 and 2-star, so there will be moments and parts in future that we will actually avoid 2-star creatures altogether, because they can pretty much just one-hit you, and it is a bit of a pain having to travel all the way back to get your corpse if you do die. So yeah, I would say that for boars and stuff like that, it is definitely worth trying to take them out, as you get a lot more materials in a quicker period of time. One other thing you would have noticed as well, as we were talking about finding our first base, was that we did also find the summoning stone for Eikthyr or Eikthyr. So it's just a small circular table in which we need to make an offering. Next to that table was a deer statue, and underneath that statue was another tablet that when we activated, it told us to hunt his kin. So I believe the item we need for summoning Eikthyr is something we gather from hunting deer. So we will have to crack on with hunting deer at some point. Now, there are 2 ways you can hunt deer, well 3 ways technically. You can just sprint at them and try and catch them before they run away. They are very skittish and they do move very fast, so I would say that's the least effective way of getting deer. But if you've got enough stamina and you deal enough damage, you can pretty much just run up and one-hit them if you're lucky enough. But the 2 better ways of doing it would be to either sneak or use a bow. Now, the starter bow in the game is not great. It does have a lot of arrow drop when you fire an arrow, so you will have to aim quite high up. And once you've learned that, it is quite effective for taking deer out. But it's a bit of a pain to learn because it does have a lot of drop. And you can also sneak on the deer as well. So sneaking is quite efficient at taking out creatures in the game. It does deal a lot of damage. Your weapons will have a sneak modifier as well as a crit modifier, although not every weapon will have that sneak modifier, I believe. I believe some of them just work on the crit. Again, I could be wrong about that, so I will have to double check and reference it in a future episode when we do sneak. And one thing you need to pay attention to when sneaking is your stamina bar. Your stamina will run out as you're sneaking and moving, but if you stand still, your stamina will regenerate. And another thing to pay attention to is the wind direction. If the wind is blowing toward the creature that you're sneaking up to, it will be able to tell that you're behind it because your scent does carry in this game. So be very careful which way the wind is blowing. If it's blowing towards you, you're absolutely fine, but if it's blowing towards the creature you're sneaking up to, your scent will carry and the creature will be able to tell that you're sneaking up behind it and it will run off. So just be very careful when looking at the wind direction for sneaking. And make sure that you are close as you can be before attacking, as the last thing you want to do is sneak up and then miss your first attack, because you won't be able to get a second one on deer. They move ridiculously fast. Aha, so we've found our first randomly generated building. So I always recommend exploring these buildings in the meadows if you find them. The reason why is that sometimes they will contain a chest which will have some goodies inside, like gold coins, feathers, torches, arrows, all kinds of good stuff can be found in there. And sometimes you'll go in these buildings and they will have a beehive in them. Now, if you take out the beehive, you can collect the queen bee. And if you take that back to your base, you can build a beehive, which will then generate honey for you on a regular basis. I'd like to have at least 5 hives going at once, but the more the better. And the honey is a great food item to get early on, as you will need a lot of it later on in the game, as it is used in a lot of cooking recipes. So yeah, I definitely recommend exploring these generated buildings when you find them and seeing if you can get as many bees as possible. The other thing you will have seen me do earlier on as well was that I put my first marker on the map. So with some food that grows in certain biomes, so the raspberries and the mushrooms, if I find a group of them that are 4 or more, so if I find a group of 4 or 5 mushrooms or 4 or 5 raspberry bushes, I pick them all and then I leave a little marker on the map to say mush or rasp or something like that, just so I know that I can come back to this location in a couple of days and those will have regrown. With the raspberry bushes, as long as you don't take out the bush themselves, they will regrow on those bushes. Mushrooms will just constantly grow no matter, so you can always do that. You can do the same with dandelions as well, and there are some other growable items later on that you can put markers down for as well. I recommend doing it because raspberries are something you might need quite a high amount of, because they are used in a lot of potion crafting, and they're also used for taming certain animals, so we will want a lot of raspberries. So I will be leaving a lot of these markers around the meadows maps, at least close enough to the base so that we can come back and gather a lot of them in a quick period of time. And we'll also reference those in future episodes when we do it for other growable items.